I stood at my college graduation ceremony, expecting my estranged father to finally show pride in my achievements. Instead, my phone buzzed with a crushing text. "Don't expect help. You're on your own." Tears blurred my vision as I tried to maintain composure in my cap and gown. Then my phone buzzed again, my CFO calling with news that would change everything. As my company's IPO hit $1 billion, my father's dismissive glare transformed into shock. The daughter he abandoned had become one of the youngest billionaires in America. My name is Bertie Walker, and at 28 years old, I became something my father never thought possible. A tech entrepreneur whose company went public with a $1 billion valuation. But that moment of triumph came after years of struggle, disappointment, and a particularly painful relationship with the man who should have been my biggest supporter. Growing up in Seattle, I had what seemed like a normal childhood at first. My father, Jack Walker, worked as a regional manager for a banking chain. He coached my soccer team, helped with science fair projects, and seemed genuinely interested in nurturing my natural curiosity. I remember him beaming when I won the state mathematics competition in 5th grade. "That's my girl," he said, lifting me onto his shoulders as we left the auditorium. Smart as a whip, just like her old man. Things changed when I turned 12. I started developing my own opinions, questioning his advice, showing the independence that most parents expect from a growing child. But my father didn't see it that way. Each disagreement became a battle. Each success that didn't follow his precise guidance was somehow diminished. "You only won 2nd place because you didn't listen when I told you to focus on the engineering category instead of computer science," he said after another competition. I had been so proud of my coding project, but his words deflated that feeling instantly. When my parents divorced a year later, the fracture between us widened into a chasm. My mother, Lynn, fell into a depression that made it difficult for her to maintain steady employment. We moved from our comfortable suburban home to a small apartment across town, and suddenly money was tight, in a way it had never been before. Meanwhile, my father remarried within 6 months to Diane, a woman with 2 sons, Ryan and Trevor, who were a few years older than me. It didn't take long to see the stark difference in how he treated them versus me. When Ryan needed a car for his 16th birthday, Dad bought him a new Ford. When Trevor wanted to attend an expensive hockey camp, Dad covered the costs without hesitation. But when I needed a laptop for school projects, he questioned whether it was really necessary. "Can't you just use the computers at the library?" he asked. "College is expensive enough without adding unnecessary gadgets." Despite these challenges, I discovered something during my freshman year at the University of Washington that would change everything. After watching several friends struggle with anxiety and depression, I developed a simple app to help students track their mental health and connect with resources. What started as a project for a computer science class quickly gained traction across campus. I called it Mindful You, and with the encouragement of my professors, I decided to turn it into a real business. Those early days were brutally difficult. Attending classes full-time while working 2 part-time jobs and pouring every spare minute into developing the app. My graduation date got pushed back once, then twice as I balanced academics with entrepreneurship. Throughout it all, contact with my father remained minimal. Holiday visits were awkward affairs where he'd pepper me with questions about when I would get a real job while praising my stepbrothers for their conventional career choices. Ryan went into finance like Dad, while Trevor became a mechanical engineer. "Those boys know how to apply themselves," he would say within my earshot. No pie-in-the-sky dreams there. Despite this history, I sent my father an invitation to my long-delayed graduation. After 6 years of grinding work, I was finally receiving my degree in computer science, and Mindful You had grown from a dorm room project into a company with 37 employees and over 2 million active users. "I'll be there," he said when he called to RSVP, the first direct conversation we'd had in months. "About time you wrapped up school. Maybe now you can focus on building a career." I didn't bother explaining that I already had a career, one that was on the verge of something big. Our board had been discussing taking the company public, and preliminary valuations looked promising. But I held that information close, harboring a small hope that graduation day might be a turning point in our relationship. Maybe seeing me in my cap and gown officially completing the education he had always emphasized as important would help him see me differently. The morning of graduation, that fragile hope took its first hit. Trevor called me as I was getting ready in my apartment. "Hey, Bertie, just wanted to give you a heads up," he said, his voice low, as if he was trying not to be overheard. Dad almost bailed on coming today. Said he had an important golf game with some clients. Ryan and I had to really press him to keep his promise. Oh, I said, the single syllable carrying the weight of yet another disappointment. Thanks for letting me know. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, Trevor added. What you've built is pretty amazing. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The excitement I'd felt earlier that morning had dimmed, but I refused to let my father's lukewarm support ruin this day. I had worked too hard to get here. With a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and practiced my smile. What I didn't know then was that graduation day would bring much more than a diploma. It would become the day everything changed between my father and me in ways neither of us could have predicted. The campus buzzed with excitement on graduation day. Families clutching bouquets and balloons navigated the crowded pathways between buildings, and the air was filled with laughter and the click of countless cameras. I arrived early to meet with my small team who had insisted on attending to support me. Jackson Ford, my chief technology officer and co-founder, gave me a bear hug when I arrived at our meeting spot near the science building. We had met in a programming class during sophomore year and clicked immediately. When I first shared my app idea with him, he stayed up 3 nights straight helping me code the initial prototype. Look at you all grown up and graduating, he teased, adjusting the tassel on my cap. 6 years later, I laughed. I think that makes me a super senior. Amanda Pearson, my chief financial officer, arrived next with a gift bag in hand. Amanda had joined our team 2 years ago after leaving a prestigious position at a venture capital firm. She believed in Mindful U's mission and had been instrumental in securing our Series B funding round. This is for after, she said, handing me the bag. And I have my phone on vibrate just in case we hear anything from Taylor. Taylor was our main contact at the investment bank handling our potential IPO. No business talk today, I insisted. Let's just enjoy the ceremony. Agreed, Jackson said. Today is all about celebrating Bertie the graduate, not Bertie the CEO. As we made our way to the grand lawn where the ceremony would take place, I scanned the growing crowd for my father. My mother couldn't attend. Her fibromyalgia had flared up badly the previous week, making travel from Portland impossible. I had arranged to have the ceremony live-streamed to her laptop, and we'd already had a tearful phone call that morning where she expressed how proud she was. The ceremony was scheduled to start at 10, and by 9:45 there was still no sign of my father or stepfamily. I kept checking my phone, fighting against the familiar sinking feeling in my stomach. They're probably just stuck in traffic, Jackson offered, noticing my anxiety. At 9:58, just as we were lining up by department, I finally spotted them. My father, stepmother, and stepbrothers were making their way to seats near the back of the audience area. I waved enthusiastically, but my father seemed preoccupied with finding seats. Ryan caught my eye and waved back, giving me a thumbs up. My father finally looked in my direction and gave a brief, perfunctory nod. The ceremony began with the traditional processional, followed by speeches from the university president and this year's distinguished alumni speaker. As a graduating student who had received honors recognition for entrepreneurship, my name was mentioned during the dean's address. A small cheer went up from the section where Jackson and Amanda were seated, but from my father's direction there was nothing but silence. After what felt like hours, they finally began calling graduates by department to receive their diplomas. As computer science students, my group would be among the last to walk. While waiting, I felt my phone vibrate in the pocket I'd sewn into my gown specifically to hold it. Thinking it might be an emergency, I discreetly checked the screen. It was a text from my father. This is taking too long. Don't expect help with your little business. You're on your own now. Always have been. The words hit me like a physical blow. My vision blurred, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The student behind me gently nudged my shoulder, and I realized our row was standing to approach the stage. Somehow, I forced my legs to move forward, even as my mind reeled from the casual cruelty of my father's message. When my name was called, I walked across the stage on autopilot. The dean shook my hand and congratulated me, but I barely registered the moment I had worked so hard to reach. As I descended the steps on the other side, I glanced toward where my father had been sitting. The seats were empty. They had left before seeing me receive my diploma. I rejoined my classmates in a daze, clutching the leather folder that would later hold my degree. The remaining speeches and closing remarks passed in a blur. When the ceremony finally concluded with the turning of our tassels and throwing of caps, I went through the motions, but the joy I had anticipated feeling was nowhere to be found. Amanda found me first in the crowd of celebrating graduates and families. "Bertie, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her smile fading as she took in my expression. "They left," I managed to say. "My father and his family. They left before I even walked across the stage." "What? Why would they do that?" Jackson asked, joining us with a confused look. I pulled out my phone and showed them the text. Amanda read it and her expression hardened. "Your little business that's about to go public," she said incredulously. "The company that's helping thousands of people with mental health issues. He's never taken it seriously," I said, the familiar hurt mixing with a new sense of anger. "He thinks I'm just playing entrepreneur." As we stood there, my phone began to ring. For a split second, I thought perhaps my father was calling to explain or apologize, but the screen showed Trevor's name instead. I hesitated, then answered. "Bertie, I'm so sorry," Trevor said immediately. "I had no idea he was going to make us leave. He claimed he had an important call come in about a work crisis." "It's fine," I said, automatically, the lie bitter on my tongue. "No, it's not," Trevor insisted. "It was really messed up. And that text he sent you. Ryan saw it over his shoulder and told me about it. I just wanted you to know that's not how we feel. What you're doing with your company is incredible." "Thanks," I said, throat tight with unshed tears. "Look, there's something else you should know, Trevor," continued, his voice lowered. "Dad's been telling everyone your business is just you playing entrepreneur. He brags about Ryan's promotion at the bank and my engineering projects, but he dismisses what you're doing completely." Each word was another knife twist, but somehow hearing it stated so plainly also brought clarity. This wasn't new behavior. It was just the latest manifestation of a pattern that had existed for years. "I appreciate you telling me," I said. After hanging up, I looked at Jackson and Amanda, who had been watching me with concern. "Let's get out of here," I said. "I could use a drink." As we walked away from the ceremony grounds, I caught sight of families taking photos, parents embracing their graduates with pride. The contrast with my own experience was stark, but alongside the pain was a growing resolve. My father had made his position clear. Now I needed to focus on the future, my future, without the burden of seeking his approval. What I didn't realize then was that within hours my life would take another dramatic turn, one that would bring my father's dismissive attitude into sharp, ironic relief. I spent the evening after graduation with Jackson, Amanda, and a few other close friends at a local restaurant. They did their best to lift my spirits, toasting my accomplishment and sharing stories from our years working together. By the time we parted ways around midnight, I had almost managed to push my father's text to the back of my mind. Almost. Back in my apartment, the silence gave those thoughts room to expand again. I tried calling my father, not sure what I would say, but feeling like I needed some kind of resolution. The call went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I was getting ready for bed when Trevor called again. "Hey, sorry to call so late," he said. "I just wanted to check on you." "I'm okay," I said, sitting down on the edge of my bed. "It's not the first time he's disappointed me." "I know, but that doesn't make it right," Trevor replied. "Look, there's something else I think you should know. Dad's been having some financial troubles. He made some bad investments last year, and I think he's been particularly bitter about your potential success because of it." This was news to me. My father had always portrayed himself as financially savvy, often lecturing me about money management, even as I built a multi-million-dollar company. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad enough that he's had to downsize some of his retirement plans," Trevor said. "Nothing catastrophic, but it's definitely bruised his ego, especially since you're doing so well." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and checked social media, a masochistic impulse I immediately regretted. My father had posted photos from a restaurant. He was hosting a celebration dinner for my stepbrothers. Ryan had received a promotion at the bank where he worked, and Trevor had been recognized for an engineering project. The caption read, "So proud of my boys and their accomplishments. Real success comes from hard work and practical choices." The implicit criticism wasn't lost on me. According to my father, my work wasn't real success. I closed the laptop harder than necessary and tried to sleep, but my mind kept cycling through memories. The Christmas 2 years ago, when he'd given Ryan and Trevor expensive watches while handing me a self-help book titled, "When to Quit Recognizing Failed Ventures." The family dinner where he'd introduced me to his colleagues as my daughter, who's still trying to figure things out despite the fact that I was already employing 20 people. The countless times he'd suggested that I should get experience at a real company before playing startup. Morning came after a fitful night's sleep, and with it the reality that I needed to refocus on the business. We were at a critical juncture with the pending IPO decision, and I couldn't afford to be distracted by family drama. I showered, dressed, and headed to our office in downtown Seattle, determined to compartmentalize my personal disappointment. Amanda was already there when I arrived at her desk, covered with spreadsheets and financial projections. "How are you holding up?" she asked, looking up from her computer. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "What's the latest from Taylor?" She gave me a look that said she didn't believe my fine but would respect my desire to focus on work. "The bank is finalizing their due diligence. We should hear about the initial price range by the end of the week," she said. "They're still being cautious about the valuation because of the market conditions, but our user growth numbers from last quarter are helping our case." For the next week, I threw myself completely into work. The IPO process was all-consuming with endless meetings, document reviews, and strategic decisions. In some ways, it was a relief. The intensity left little mental space for dwelling on my father's text or his absence at graduation. But the hurt lingered beneath the surface, occasionally breaking through in moments of quiet. I found myself second-guessing decisions, wondering if perhaps my father was right. Was I out of my depth? Was Mindful You just a little business that I was taking too seriously? Amanda noticed my wavering confidence during a particularly challenging meeting with our lawyers. "What's going on with you?" she asked afterward. 3 months ago, you would have pushed back much harder on their conservative approach to the risk factors section. I hesitated, then admitted I keep hearing my father's voice in my head, questioning whether I really know what I'm doing. "Bertie, listen to me," Amanda said firmly. "I left a partnership track position at Westlake Ventures to join this company because I believe in what we're building. Your father has no idea what you've accomplished or what you're capable of." Her words helped, but the emotional undercurrent remained. Each night I would go home exhausted, only to lie awake, replaying years of subtle and not-so-subtle undermining from the person who should have been my biggest champion. Then, exactly 1 week after graduation, the situation escalated dramatically. I was in the middle of a meeting with our product team when my assistant interrupted to say my father was in the reception area, insisting on seeing me. Surprised and unsettled, I excused myself from the meeting. He was standing by the front desk, looking simultaneously out of place and entitled in our modern open office space. When he saw me, his expression shifted into something that resembled contrition. "Bertie, can we talk privately?" he asked. I led him to a small conference room and closed the door, heart racing with a confusing mix of anger, hope, and caution. "I thought we should clear the air," he began. "Things didn't go well at graduation." "You could say that," I replied, keeping my voice level. "You left before I even walked across the stage." "There was an emergency at work," he said dismissively. "But that's not why I'm here. I've been thinking about your company, and I realize I may have underestimated what you're building." For a moment, hope flared. Was this finally the recognition I'd been seeking? Had he actually looked into Mindful You and understood its value? "The thing is," he continued, "I'm in a bit of a financial bind right now. Some investments didn't pan out the way I expected, and I'm having to make adjustments." The hope dimmed as I began to see where this was heading. "I was thinking," he said, leaning forward, "that since you're doing so well, you could help your old man out with a loan. A substantial one. Once the company goes public, it should be easy for you to access that kind of money." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. After years of dismissing my work after the cruel text at graduation, he was now asking me for money. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You've spent years telling me my business is just a hobby, that I'm not serious, that I should get a real job. You walked out of my graduation and texted that I shouldn't expect help from you. And now you want me to give you a loan." His expression hardened. "I raised you," he said, as if that explained everything. "I paid for your education. You wouldn't even have that fancy degree if it weren't for me. I think I deserve to benefit from whatever success you managed to achieve. I paid for my education with scholarships and student loans," I corrected him, "loans that I'm still paying off. And Mom was the one who raised me after the divorce." "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed. "This is what family does. We help each other. Ryan and Trevor would step up if they were in your position." "The way you stepped up for me," I asked quietly. His face flushed with anger. "I always knew you were selfish, playing with your little app while real people do real work. You think you're so special because some foolish investors threw money at your hobby. You don't have what it takes to run a real business. You'll crash and burn without my guidance. I stood up, shaking with a mixture of anger and a strange sense of clarity. I think you should leave now. You ungrateful little, he began, but I cut him off by opening the door and signaling to our head of security who happened to be passing by. Mark, could you please escort my father out? He was just leaving. My father's face contorted with rage as Mark stepped forward. You'll regret this, he spat. When this IPO fails, and it will fail, don't come crawling to me for help. You're nothing without me. Nothing. His voice had risen to a shout and heads were turning throughout the office. The scene was excruciating, but I kept my expression neutral as Mark firmly guided my father toward the exit. After he was gone, I returned to my office and closed the door, desperate for a moment to compose myself. My hands were shaking and I felt nauseated from the confrontation. A knock at the door made me jump. Come in, I called, quickly wiping my eyes. It was Jackson. Are you okay? That sounded intense. I'll be fine, I said, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. Just family drama. Jackson sat down across from me. Bertie, everyone heard him yelling. It wasn't just drama. It was verbal abuse. Before I could respond, my computer chimed with a new email notification. It was from my stepmother, Diane. The subject line read, FWD thoughts on Bertie's business. Curious and apprehensive, I opened it to find a chain of emails that had clearly been forwarded accidentally. As I scrolled through the messages, my stomach tightened. They were exchanges between my father and various family members dating back years, all containing derogatory comments about me and Mindful You. Another round of funding for Bertie's pretend company. When will she grow up and get a real job? Read one from just months ago. Had to listen to Bertie go on about user acquisition at dinner. As if playing on phones is the same as actual business. Ryan's work at the bank is making a real impact, said another. There were dozens of them, each more dismissive than the last. The most recent was from just after graduation. Bertie had the nerve to ignore my advice again. This IPO pipe dream will be the reality check she needs. I looked up at Jackson, who had been watching my face as I read. My father has been actively undermining me behind my back for years. I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil I felt inside. And now he wants to benefit from the success he never believed in. Jackson's expression was a mixture of anger and concern. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. I'm going to make this IPO successful. Not to prove him wrong, though that will be a nice side effect, but because I believe in what we're building. As Jackson left my office, I realized that while the confrontation with my father had been painful, it had also burned away the last of my need for his approval. For the first time, I felt truly free to lead on my own terms. What I didn't know was that my father wasn't done trying to sabotage me, and that his next moves would threaten everything I had worked to build. The 2 weeks following my father's office visit brought a whirlwind of challenges that tested my leadership and resilience in ways I never anticipated. While I tried to focus on the final preparations for our IPO, complications seemed to multiply daily. Amanda burst into my office early Monday morning, her usually composed demeanor visibly shaken. Peyton Evans is threatening to pull out, she said without preamble. My stomach dropped. Peyton was one of our largest investors, and his support had been crucial in convincing others to back us. Why? What happened? I asked, setting aside the presentation I'd been reviewing. He received a call raising concerns about our company's stability. Amanda replied, her expression grim. He wouldn't tell me who called, but he mentioned hearing rumors about leadership issues and technical vulnerabilities. A suspicion began forming in my mind, but before I could voice it, my phone rang. It was Jackson, and he sounded alarmed. Bertie, we need to talk. Now. In person, he said, his usual laid-back tone replaced with urgency. 20 minutes later, Jackson, Amanda, and I were gathered in our secure conference room. Jackson had insisted on meeting there instead of my office, which immediately heightened my concern. I was doing a routine security audit last night and found something concerning Jackson, explained, turning his laptop so we could see the screen. There's a potential vulnerability in our data encryption protocol. It's not critical yet, but if left unaddressed, it could expose user data. How long will it take to fix? I asked, already calculating the impact on our pre-IPO timeline. That's the thing, Jackson said, running a hand through his hair. It's buried deep in our architecture. A proper fix could take weeks of development and testing. We could implement a temporary patch, but that would be hiding a known issue from potential investors, Amanda finished. The SEC took disclosure requirements seriously, especially for companies handling sensitive user data. We need to be transparent about this, I decided. Let's document the vulnerability, our plan to address it, and include it in the revised risk factors section. Amanda nodded, but her expression remained troubled. That's the right ethical choice, but it will impact our valuation. And with Peyton already wavering, the day didn't improve from there. By afternoon, I received a request for an emergency board meeting. Our lead independent director, Thomas Grant, cited urgent governance concerns that require immediate attention. The board meeting the following morning turned out to be an ambush. Thomas and two other board members, Barbara Wells and Gregory Park, had apparently been speaking behind the scenes. We need to discuss leadership transition options, Thomas announced after basic formalities. With the IPO approaching, investors are expressing concern about Bertie's experience level. I felt like I'd been slapped. This is the first I'm hearing of any such concerns, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. Our major investors have consistently supported my leadership. Barbara leaned forward. Bertie, you've built something remarkable, but taking a company public requires a different skill set. Perhaps a more seasoned executive would inspire greater market confidence. The implication hung in the air. Though no one said it explicitly, the subtext was clear: a young female CEO might not project the image of stability that Wall Street wanted. Is there something specific that's prompted this discussion? Asked Melanie Chen, one of the board members who had always been supportive of my leadership. Gregory cleared his throat. We've received some concerning feedback from potential investors. There's a perception that the company might benefit from more experienced guidance. What investors? I pressed. Names, please. The three board members exchanged glances. We're not at liberty to say, Thomas finally responded, but the concerns are significant enough that we felt obligated to raise them. The meeting continued for another hour, with the faction led by Thomas pushing for bringing in an experienced CEO, while I would transition to a founder and chief innovation officer role. It was a sugar-coated demotion, and everyone knew it. By the time we adjourned, no formal decision had been made, but the battle lines were drawn. As I gathered my materials, I overheard Thomas murmuring to Gregory Jack was right about her limitations. Jack. My father's name hit me like a thunderbolt. Could he have been in contact with Thomas? It seemed impossible. Thomas moved in financial circles far removed from my father's world. And yet the timing was suspicious. I was still processing this possibility when my assistant informed me that my father was in the reception area again, insisting on seeing me. Despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet him, curious about what could possibly bring him back after our last encounter. He was waiting in the same small conference room, looking simultaneously contrite and impatient. I may have been harsh last time, he began without preamble. We both said things in the heat of the moment. I waited, saying nothing. The thing is, Bertie, he continued, filling the silence, I've been thinking about your company and its potential. I know we've had our differences, but I'm still your father. I want to help. Help how? I asked cautiously. I have contacts, connections that could be valuable to you. People who understand business at a level you haven't experienced yet. He leaned forward. I've actually already reached out to some of them on your behalf. My suspicion crystallized into certainty. Who exactly have you contacted, Dad? He smiled clearly, interpreting my question as interest rather than alarm. A few key people. Thomas Grant, for one. We play golf at the same club. I also spoke with Peyton Evans. Turns out his brother-in-law works at my bank. Small world. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. My own father had been actively undermining me to my board and investors. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. You've been telling my board members and investors that I'm inexperienced and incapable of leading the company I built from nothing. His smile faltered. I wouldn't put it that way. I simply expressed some natural concerns any father would have. Suggested that perhaps you might benefit from more experienced guidance. You had no right to interfere, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. I have every right, he countered, his tone hardening. I'm your father. I know what's best for you. You forfeited the right to make decisions for me years ago, I said. And now you're actively trying to sabotage my company because what? Your ego can't handle that. I've built something successful without your help. His face flushed. You ungrateful little girl. This is exactly why you need supervision. You're too emotional, too irrational to lead a public company. The same security guard who had escorted him out last time happened to be walking by. I caught his eye through the glass wall and nodded slightly. He immediately understood and opened the door. "Miss Walker, is everything okay?" he asked. "My father was just leaving," I said firmly. "And he won't be allowed back into the building. Ever." This time my father didn't shout as he was escorted out. Instead, he gave me a look of cold determination that sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't over, and we both knew it. The following days brought a cascade of new problems. 2 more investors called with concerns similar to Peyton's. Our pre-IPO valuation took a hit in preliminary discussions with the investment bank. A reporter from a tech industry publication contacted our PR team, asking for comment on leadership instability rumors. Most concerning was the board's continuing push for a leadership change. Thomas called a second emergency meeting this time with a specific proposal: delay the IPO by 6 months and use that time to transition leadership to someone with public company experience. During a particularly tense discussion, Barbara Wells made a comment that confirmed my suspicions about gender bias. Investors respond to confidence, and frankly, the market tends to perceive male leaders as more decisive in crisis situations. I left that meeting shaken but determined. In my office, I found Amanda waiting with more troubling news. The vulnerability Jackson found, someone leaked information about it to TechCrunch. They're planning a story. I sank into my chair. How bad? Their angle is questioning whether we've been transparent enough with users about data security, Amanda said. It's not fatal, but the timing couldn't be worse for the IPO. That evening, as I worked late trying to develop a strategy to address these mounting challenges, I received a text from Trevor. "You should know Dad's been bragging to his friends about saving you from yourself," said. "He's convinced some big investor that you need adult supervision. I'm so sorry." The final blow came the next morning, when Jackson discovered that my father had recently made several angel investments in a direct competitor, a mental health app founded by a former fraternity brother of Ryan's. He had leveraged connections he'd gained through me to gain entree to startup investing circles, only to back a competitor rather than support my company. By Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week before our planned IPO date, I faced a perfect storm of challenges. A board pushing for my removal, investors getting cold feet, a technical vulnerability, threatening user trust, negative press coverage, brewing, and my own father actively working to undermine me professionally. I sat alone in my office after everyone had left for the weekend, staring out at the Seattle skyline as darkness fell. For the first time since founding Mindful You, I seriously considered whether I should step aside. Maybe Thomas and the others were right. Maybe I was too inexperienced, too emotionally invested to lead the company through this critical transition. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Whatever you're facing right now, remember what I always told you. Your worth isn't determined by others' opinions of you. It's determined by your actions when faced with adversity." As I read her words, something shifted inside me. The doubts didn't disappear, but alongside them grew a steely determination. If I stepped down now, it wouldn't just affect me. It would affect our 37 employees, our 2 million users, and countless future users who could benefit from our platform. More than that, it would validate every dismissive comment my father had ever made. Every time he'd called my business playing entrepreneur. Every time he'd questioned my capabilities or undermined my confidence. I picked up my phone and sent a group text to Jackson and Amanda: emergency strategy session tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring coffee. We have work to do. This was far from over. In fact, the real fight was just beginning. The next morning dawned gray and rainy, matching my mood as I arrived at the office before 7. Jackson and Amanda showed up at 9 as requested, both looking concerned but determined. "Before we start," I said, as they settled into the chairs across from my desk, "I need to know if you still believe in this company and in my leadership. I'd understand if recent events have made you reconsider." Amanda straightened in her chair. "I didn't leave a partnership track position to jump ship at the first sign of trouble. I'm here because I believe in Mindful You and in you." "What she said," Jackson added. "Though I'd like to add that your father is a world-class jerk and proving him wrong is just an added bonus to building something important." Their loyalty brought the first genuine smile to my face in days. "Then let's figure this out. We have exactly 1 week until our scheduled IPO date. For the next 3 hours, we cataloged every challenge facing us. The board faction pushing for my removal, wavering investors, the security vulnerability, the brewing media story, and my father's continued interference. It was a formidable list. If we're going to turn this around, we need to address each issue head-on, I said. Jackson, what's the status of the security fix? We've been working around the clock, he replied. The good news is we've identified a solution that's more elegant than I initially thought possible. We can implement it within 48 hours, and it actually improves our overall architecture. That's something Amanda noted. But we still need to disclose the vulnerability in our SEC filings. Yes, but we can also announce that we identified and fixed it prior to going public, I pointed out. That demonstrates proactive security management. We moved methodically through each challenge, developing response strategies. By early afternoon, we had the outline of a plan, but the most difficult issues remained the board resistance and the shaken investor confidence. We need to talk about Thomas Barbara and Gregory Amanda, said reluctantly. They're not going to back down easily. I've been thinking about that, I said. Their primary concern is that I don't project enough stability and experience to inspire market confidence, right? Jackson nodded. That's what they claim anyway. Then I need to change that perception decisively. I pulled out a notepad where I'd been jotting ideas. What if we released a video? Just me speaking candidly about our journey, our challenges, and our vision, complete transparency about the vulnerability we found, and fixed about our growth strategy about everything. That's risky, Amanda cautioned. Pre-IPO communication is heavily regulated. We'll have legal review, every word, I assured her. But I think we need to show, not tell, that I'm capable of leading through challenges, and transparency builds trust. The rest of the weekend disappeared in a blur of preparation. We drafted scripts, consulted with our lawyers, and prepared data to support our narrative. By Sunday evening, we were ready to begin filming early Monday morning. Before leaving the office, I checked my email one last time and found a message from a name I didn't recognize, Sarah Mitchell. The subject line read, "Important information regarding Thomas Grant and your IPO." Intrigued, I opened it to find a message from a senior associate at Thomas's investment firm. "Miss Walker," it began. "We haven't met, but I've been following your company with interest. I recently overheard a conversation between Thomas Grant and your father that I believe you should know about. They were explicitly discussing ways to delay your IPO and force a leadership change. Thomas mentioned that he stands to benefit financially from a delayed offering due to certain side investments. I cannot provide more details without compromising my position, but I felt you should be aware of this conflict of interest. What you do with this information is up to you." I immediately forwarded the email to our general counsel with a request for an urgent call. If Thomas had undisclosed conflicts of interest that changed the dynamics of our board battle significantly, Monday brought a fresh wave of challenges. I arrived at the office to find an email from our PR director with a link to a business blog post titled, "Trouble at Mindful U Sources Suggest Leadership Struggle Ahead of IPO." The article quoted people familiar with the situation describing concerns about my ability to lead a public company. The quotes had my father's fingerprints all over them, though he wasn't mentioned by name. One particularly telling line read, "Those who have known Walker since her early years question whether she has the temperament for high-pressure situations." Our general counsel called mid-morning with his assessment of the Sarah Mitchell email. "If true, this is a serious violation of fiduciary duty," he explained. "Board members must disclose conflicts of interest. But we need more than an anonymous tip to act on this." We proceeded with filming the video as planned. I spoke candidly about our journey, acknowledged the security vulnerability we'd discovered and fixed, and outlined our vision for the company's future. We released it on our corporate website and social media channels by late afternoon. The response was immediate and largely positive. Tech journalists praised our transparency. Users expressed appreciation for our honesty about the security issue. By evening, several industry leaders had shared the video with supportive comments. Tuesday morning, I received a call from Melanie Chen, one of my supportive board members. "That video was brilliant," she said. "I've already heard from 2 major investors who were impressed with your straightforward approach, but Thomas is furious. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Says you violated communication protocols before the IPO." I had everything cleared by legal, I assured her. "I know that, and most of the board knows that, Melanie replied. But Thomas, Barbara, and Gregory are using this as ammunition. They're formally proposing to delay the IPO and install an interim CEO. Despite our progress, it seemed the board battle was coming to a head. I spent the day preparing for the showdown, gathering data on the positive market response to our video and documentation of every legal review we'd conducted before releasing it. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Just saw your video. So proud of the leader you've become. Your father called me ranting about it, says you're airing dirty laundry. I told him the only dirty laundry is his behavior." I smiled at her support, then scrolled through my other messages. One from Trevor caught my attention. "Dad's livid about your video. He's been on the phone all day. Just overheard him talking to someone named Thomas about upping the pressure. Be careful." Wednesday's board meeting was as contentious as expected. Thomas began with a stern lecture about proper pre-IPO communications protocols. "While I appreciate the positive response to Miss Walker's video," he said, emphasizing my last name rather than my title, the timing and content raised serious concerns about judgment. This impulsive communication style further convinces me that we need more experienced leadership before proceeding with the public offering. Before I could respond, Barbara jumped in. "I move that we formally delay the IPO for 6 months and appoint an interim CEO to guide the company through this transition." Second, Gregory added immediately. It was clearly choreographed. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm and focused. "Before we vote, I'd like to present some information relevant to this discussion," I said, opening my laptop. First, our legal team cleared every aspect of the video communication as documented here. I shared the screen showing the review process. Second, the market response has been overwhelmingly positive, with specific praise for our transparency. I continued methodically presenting data on user growth, investor feedback, and the successful security fix. When I finished, I addressed the real issue directly. "I believe some board members may have conflicts of interest that are influencing their position on the IPO timing," I said, looking directly at Thomas. "I've received information suggesting that delaying our offering might financially benefit certain individuals due to side investments." Thomas's face flushed with anger. "That's an outrageous accusation. Then you'll have no objection to a full disclosure of all relevant financial interests," I countered, "as required by our corporate bylaws." The room fell silent. Melanie and the other supportive board members looked shocked but resolute. Thomas, Barbara, and Gregory exchanged glances that confirmed my suspicions. Furthermore, I continued, "I have evidence that certain board members have been in communication with my estranged father, who has explicitly stated his intention to undermine my leadership and this IPO." I played a voicemail Trevor had forwarded me that morning. A message my father had left him explicitly mentioning his conversations with Thomas about putting Birdie in her place. The mood in the room shifted palpably. Even Barbara looked uncomfortable now. In light of these revelations, Melanie said firmly, "I move that we reaffirm our commitment to the original IPO timeline and to Birdie's leadership. Furthermore, I suggest we investigate the potential conflicts of interest raised today." The vote that followed was tight, but in my favor 7-5, with Thomas, Barbara, Gregory, and 2 others opposed. But the narrow margin made it clear that my position remained precarious. After the meeting, Thomas approached me. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You've won a battle, not the war." By Thursday morning, Thomas, Barbara, and Gregory had tendered their resignations from the board, effective immediately. While this removed their direct opposition, it also created new complications. We now needed to explain board turnover on the eve of our IPO. I spent Thursday in back-to-back calls with investors, including Peyton Evans, working to stabilize their confidence. Most were reassured by our transparent approach and the departure of board members with potential conflicts, but the cumulative impact of the past weeks had taken a toll on our expected valuation. Friday brought a new development when Trevor called with alarming news. "Birdie, I found something you need to see," he said. "Dad's been funding a research paper criticizing mental health apps, specifically targeting your approach. He's planning to have it released the day before your IPO." "How did you find this?" I asked, stunned by this new level of sabotage. "He left some emails open on his computer when I stopped by the house," Trevor explained. "I took pictures. It's clearly timed to damage your offering." This felt like the final straw. My own father was willing to potentially harm millions of users who benefited from mental health support just to prove a point about my leadership. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Amanda worked with the investment bank to finalize our offering price, lower than we'd initially hoped, but still respectable given the circumstances. Jackson and his team performed final security audits to ensure our systems were rock solid. Sunday evening, with just 15 hours until our IPO, my phone rang with Amanda's number. "We have a problem," she said, her voice tense. "The SEC has some last-minute questions about our disclosures. Apparently someone, we both knew who, submitted an anonymous tip questioning our financial projections." "How bad is it?" I asked, already calculating how this would impact our timeline. "It could delay us by days or weeks while they review everything," Amanda replied, "unless we can provide comprehensive documentation first thing tomorrow morning." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of weeks of constant crisis. Everything we'd built, every person who depended on Mindful You, employees, users, investors, all hanging in the balance. And my father still working actively to destroy it all. "Call the team," I said after a moment. "Everyone. We'll work through the night if we have to." As I hung up, I realized this was the moment my father had been pushing for. The breaking point where I would either crumble under the pressure or prove definitively that I was capable of leading through crisis. The choice was clear. This was no longer about proving him wrong or earning his approval. It was about protecting something important, that I had built something that mattered to millions of people. I took a deep breath and began making calls. The hardest battle still lay ahead, but for the first time in weeks, I felt absolute clarity about the path forward. As my team gathered at the office that Sunday evening, the gravity of our situation became increasingly clear. Amanda laid out the specific SEC inquiries which focused on our user growth projections and revenue model. "We need to provide enhanced documentation for every figure in our prospectus," she explained. "They're questioning the methodology behind our 5-year forecasts." Jackson shook his head in frustration. "The timing is obviously intentional. Someone wants to force a delay." The implication hung in the air. We all knew who that someone was. "Let's focus on what we can control," I said, forcing calm into my voice despite my exhaustion. "I need everyone working on their respective areas. Amanda, coordinate the financial documentation. Jackson, make sure our technical disclosures are bulletproof. Maria, work with legal on the formal response." As the team dispersed to their tasks, I retreated to my office for a moment alone. The past weeks had been a relentless barrage of crises, each one seemingly designed to push me to my breaking point. My father had methodically targeted every vulnerability he could find: the board, investors, media, and now regulators. I stared out at the Seattle skyline lights twinkling against the dark sky and made a decision. I needed space, complete isolation, to reset emotionally and strategize without constant reactive pressure. "I'm going offline for 3 days," I announced to Amanda and Jackson when I emerged. "You'll handle things here while I'm gone." Their expressions showed surprise and concern. "The IPO is in 15 hours, Amanda reminded me. "Not anymore," I replied. "We can't adequately address these SEC questions by morning. We need to request a short delay anyway." "Where will you be?" Jackson asked. "Somewhere I can think clearly," I said. "I'll be back with a plan. A real one, not just another reactive response." Before they could object further, I left the office. I drove north to a small cabin on Whidbey Island that belonged to my mother's friend, a place with no internet and poor cell reception. Perfect for what I needed. For 3 days, I disconnected completely from the chaos. I slept for 12 hours that first night, the first uninterrupted sleep I'd had in weeks. I spent the following days walking on the beach meditating and thinking deeply about Mindful You, my leadership, and the path forward. By the 3rd day, clarity had emerged. I realized I had been playing defense, reacting to each attack rather than controlling the narrative. That would end now. I returned to Seattle on Wednesday morning and called an all-hands meeting for noon. When I walked into our main conference room, the surprise on my team's faces was evident. I looked different, calmer, more centered, and absolutely determined. "Thank you all for your incredible work during my absence," I began. "I know how hard everyone has been working to address the SEC inquiries. Before I share our new strategy, I want to acknowledge something important. We've been under attack. Not just from market conditions or normal business challenges, but from a coordinated effort to undermine our company and my leadership." Murmurs spread through the room as I continued. "My own father has been actively working to sabotage our IPO because he can't accept that I've built something successful without his help or approval. He's leveraged connections, spread rumors, and even contacted regulators to raise questions about our business. The room fell silent. While many knew pieces of this story, I had never stated it so directly before. But here's what matters. His actions have nothing to do with the value of what we've built together. Mindful You helps millions of people manage their mental health. That's real. That's important. And that's what we're going to focus on moving forward. I unveiled the comprehensive plan I'd developed during my isolation. First, we would delay the IPO by exactly 2 weeks. Enough time to thoroughly address the SEC inquiries, but not so long that we lost momentum. Second, we would implement Jackson's security fix immediately, not as a patch, but as a complete architecture enhancement that would make our platform even more secure. The vulnerability we discovered was actually an opportunity in disguise, I explained. Jackson's team has found a way to restructure our data handling that improves both security and performance. We're going to implement it now and make it a centerpiece of our revised prospectus. Next, I addressed our investor communication strategy. Instead of defensively responding to concerns, we would proactively showcase our strengths. Amanda will be scheduling individual calls with our top 20 investors. I'll personally lead each one, providing complete transparency about our challenges and our solutions. No spin, no sugarcoating, just honest communication about where we are and where we're going. Finally, I turned to the board situation. We need to replace the 3 directors who resigned. I've identified potential candidates with impeccable credentials who understand our mission. More importantly, I've secured a commitment from Leslie Morris to join as chairperson. A ripple of excitement passed through the room. Leslie Morris was a legendary tech executive who had led 2 successful IPOs and served on the boards of several Fortune 500 companies. She believes in what we're building, I continued. And her endorsement sends a powerful message to the market about our credibility. The energy in the room had transformed completely. Where there had been exhaustion and uncertainty, I now saw determination and renewed purpose. One last thing I said. I know these past weeks have been incredibly difficult. Everyone has been working around the clock under intense pressure. So effective immediately, I'm giving everyone 3 days of paid leave to be taken on a staggered schedule over the next 2 weeks. We need to be at our best for what's ahead, and that means taking care of ourselves too. The announcement was met with surprised applause. It was a small gesture, but it acknowledged the toll the recent battles had taken on everyone. As the team dispersed, energized by our new direction, Amanda approached me. That was unexpected, she said, but exactly what we needed. Where did this plan come from? Clarity, I replied simply. I finally stopped reacting and started leading. The next 2 weeks were intensely busy, but remarkably different from the chaotic weeks that had preceded them. We methodically executed our plans, starting with a comprehensive response to the SEC inquiries. Our documentation was so thorough that they cleared our revised prospectus within 8 business days, record time for such detailed questions. Jackson's team implemented the security enhancement flawlessly, and we issued a press release detailing the improvements. Tech blogs picked up the story, with one influential security expert calling our approach a model for how companies should handle vulnerability discovery and remediation. The investor calls proceeded better than expected. By being completely transparent about our challenges, including the personal attacks I'd faced, we actually strengthened trust. Peyton Evans, who had been wavering just weeks before now, became one of our strongest advocates. I've seen how you handle adversity now, he told me after our call. That's worth more than 1,000 perfect pitch decks. Leslie Morris joined our board as plan, bringing immediate credibility and strategic insight. Her first act as chairperson was to implement governance reforms that would prevent the kind of conflicts that had plagued our previous board. 1 week before our rescheduled IPO date, Trevor called with news. Dad knows about your new strategy and the Morris appointment, he said. He's panicking. I overheard him trying to contact his attorney about possibly blocking the IPO on some technical grounds, but even his lawyer told him there was no basis. How do you know all this? I asked, surprised by the detailed information. Trevor hesitated. I've been recording his phone calls when they involve you or mindful you, he admitted. After seeing how far he was willing to go to hurt you, I wanted evidence in case things escalated further. I don't know if that makes me a terrible son, but what he's doing is wrong. You're not a terrible son, I assured him. You're just trying to do the right thing in a difficult situation. 2 days before our IPO, I received an unexpected email from my stepmother, Diane. Jack is planning to attend your opening bell ceremony, she wrote. He's told several friends he's been guiding you through the process and wants to be there for your big moment. I thought you should know. The news didn't surprise me. My father's pattern was clear. Undermine me privately while trying to claim credit publicly. But this time I was prepared. The night before our IPO final preparations were complete. Our documentation was in order, our technology was secure, and our team was ready. As we gathered for a quiet celebration in the office, Amanda's phone rang. "It's Taylor from the investment bank," she said, stepping away to take the call. When she returned a few minutes later, her expression was serious. "There's been a last-minute regulatory question about our user privacy disclosures. Nothing major, but they want clarification before trading begins. 6 weeks ago, this kind of 11th-hour complication would have sent me into crisis mode. Now I simply nodded. Let's get legal on it right away. We'll work through the night if necessary." The team mobilized immediately, and by 3 a.m. we had prepared a comprehensive response addressing every aspect of the inquiry. As dawn broke over Seattle, we received confirmation that our clarifications had been accepted. The IPO would proceed as scheduled. As I showered and dressed for the most important day of my professional life, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the dorm room where I'd first conceived Mindful You to this moment, on the cusp of taking the company public, it had been a path marked by both tremendous challenge and profound growth. My phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. "We're here. Dad's already talking to reporters claiming he was your business advisor. Ryan and I are keeping our distance, but we wanted you to know we're here to support you, not him." I texted back a simple thank you and took a deep breath. The final confrontation with my father was inevitable, but for the first time I felt completely prepared for it. As I headed for the door, I caught my reflection in the mirror, poised confident and unburdened by the need for validation that had haunted me for so long. Whatever happened today, I knew who I was and what I had built. And that knowledge was more powerful than any approval my father could give or withhold. The trading floor awaited, and with it the culmination of years of work and weeks of battle. I was ready to face whatever came next, including my father's desperate attempt to associate himself with my success. What he didn't realize was that his power to affect me had already disappeared, washed away by the clarity I had found in those 3 days of isolation. As I stepped out into the morning light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: absolute confidence in my path forward. The IPO was just hours away, and with it a new chapter would begin, one entirely of my own writing. The trading floor buzzed with energy as I arrived with my core team, Amanda Jackson, and a few key executives who had been with Mindful You from the early days. Television cameras were set up in strategic locations, ready to capture the moment our company would transition from private to public. Financial analysts clustered in small groups, their expressions revealing nothing about their predictions for our stock performance. Leslie Morris, our new board chairperson, greeted me with a warm handshake. "Ready for this?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with excitement that belied her decades of experience. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, scanning the room. It didn't take long to spot my father. He stood near one of the camera setups, dressed in an expensive suit that looked brand new. Ryan and Trevor hovered awkwardly several feet away from him, their discomfort evident. When my father caught sight of me, he immediately began moving in my direction, a practiced smile spreading across his face. "There's my girl," he said loudly enough for nearby reporters to hear. "The big day is finally here." I maintained a neutral expression as he approached, aware of the cameras that might capture our interaction. "Dad," I acknowledged with a slight nod. "I was just telling these folks about how we've been planning this since you were in college," he continued, gesturing to a reporter who had drifted closer. "All those late-night strategy sessions, all my connections in the financial world, it's finally paying off." Before I could respond, Amanda appeared at my side. "Bertie, they need you at the podium for the final preparations. We're on in 20 minutes. Grateful for the interruption, I excused myself, leaving my father mid-sentence. As I walked away, I could hear him continuing his narrative to anyone who would listen, claiming credit for mentorship and guidance he had never provided. The final preparations passed in a blur of technical checks and last-minute briefings. Amanda stayed close periodically, whispering updates in my ear. "Initial indications are strong," she murmured, as we positioned ourselves near the ceremonial bell. "Demand is exceeding expectations." At precisely 9:29, the floor quieted as the countdown began. I stood with my hand poised over the button that would ring the opening bell, surrounded by my team, the people who had actually built Mindful You through years of hard work and genuine collaboration. As the clock hit 9:30, I pressed the button. The sound of the bell reverberated through the trading floor, and cheers erupted around us. Mindful You was officially a public company. The first hour of trading was a roller coaster of emotions. Our opening price was slightly above the range we had set, $22 per share instead of the planned $18 to $20, indicating strong initial demand. By 10:15 it had climbed to 26, and by 11 it had reached 30. Amanda was in constant communication with our bankers, receiving updates on trading volumes and institutional buyer activity. Around 11:30, she pulled me aside, her expression a mixture of disbelief and elation. "We just crossed $50 a share," she said. "Our market cap is over $1 billion. The magnitude of that number took a moment to register. $1 billion. The company I had started in my dorm room to help friends dealing with anxiety was now valued at over $1 billion. As the news spread through our team, celebrations grew more enthusiastic. Reporters began approaching for comments on the stronger-than-expected performance. In the midst of the excitement, I caught sight of my father again. He was working the room like a politician at a fundraiser, shaking hands and clearly positioning himself as an insider to our success. During a brief lull in the activity, I found myself standing near a refreshment table when my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Stock hit $62. Official billionaire status achieved. Congratulations, boss. Just as I read the message, my father approached, flanked by a reporter from a major financial network. "Bertie Charles here was hoping for a comment on today's performance," my father said smoothly. "I was just telling him about our family's entrepreneurial tradition and how I've guided you through this process." The reporter looked at me expectantly, recorder extended. In that moment, with the text from Amanda still visible on my phone screen, I made a decision about how to handle this situation once and for all. "I'd be happy to comment on today's success," I said to the reporter. "Mindful You's performance reflects the incredible work of our entire team over the past 6 years. I'm particularly grateful to Amanda Pearson, our CFO, and Jackson Ford, our CTO, who have been instrumental in building this company." I deliberately did not mention my father, who shifted uncomfortably beside me. "And what about family support?" the reporter prompted, glancing at my father. "I understand your father has been involved in the business strategy." "Actually," I said calmly, "Mindful You was built without family financial support or business connections. It's been an independent journey from the beginning. Our success today belongs to our employees, our investors who believed in us early on, and the millions of users who trust our platform with their mental health needs." My father's face flushed red, but with cameras nearby, he maintained his smile through clenched teeth. The reporters, sensing tension, quickly wrapped up the interview and moved on to other executives. As soon as the cameras were gone, my father gripped my elbow tightly. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. "After everything I've done for you?" I gently but firmly removed his hand from my arm. "Everything you've done? You mean like contacting my board members to undermine me, or approaching my investors with concerns about my leadership, or perhaps funding research specifically designed to damage our IPO?" His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't realized I knew about that last one. "You're making a scene," he warned, glancing around nervously. "No, Dad. For once, I'm just stating the truth. You've spent years dismissing my work, then actively tried to sabotage this IPO when you realized it might be successful. And now you want to claim credit." "I'm your father," he said, as if that explained and excused everything. "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And for years, I desperately wanted your approval. I wanted you to be proud of me. But I've realized something important. I don't need your approval anymore. What I've built is real, it's valuable, and it's mine." Trevor and Ryan had noticed our conversation and approached cautiously. They had heard enough to understand the situation. "Dad, maybe we should get some air," Trevor suggested, placing a hand on our father's shoulder. My father shrugged him off. "This isn't over," he said to me, his voice low and threatening. "Actually, it is," I replied, my voice steady. "You've tried everything possible to control me and undermine my success. None of it worked. Mindful You is now a billion-dollar public company. I'm not your little girl anymore, desperate for Daddy's approval. I'm a CEO who just led a successful IPO despite your best efforts to prevent it." For perhaps the first time in his life, my father seemed genuinely speechless. The carefully constructed narrative he'd built, of the wise father guiding his naive daughter, had crumbled completely. What remained was the truth, a man whose ego couldn't handle his daughter's independent success. "You'll regret this," he finally said, but the threat sounded hollow even to him. "No, Dad, I won't," I responded with certainty. "What I would have regretted is continuing to chase your approval at the expense of my own integrity. That ends today." As he turned to leave, visibly shaken by the confrontation, Trevor and Ryan remained behind. "I'm sorry," Ryan said quietly. "We should have stood up to him sooner." "You both did what you could," I assured them. "His behavior isn't your responsibility." Still, Trevor added what he did was wrong. "And for what it's worth, we're incredibly proud of what you've built. No matter what happens with him, we'd like to be part of your life. As brothers, not as extensions of Dad." The sincere offer of reconciliation touched me deeply. Despite everything, I was gaining a family connection I had never truly had before, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of interviews, congratulations, and celebration. By the time the closing bell rang, Mindful You stock had settled at $58 per share, nearly 3 times our initial offering price. Our market capitalization stood at $1.2 billion, exceeding even our most optimistic projections. In the months that followed, Mindful You continued to grow and thrive. We expanded our user base, launched new features, and built on the foundation we had established. I rarely heard from my father during this time, though occasional updates from Trevor and Ryan suggested he was still struggling to accept the new reality of our relationship. 6 months after our IPO, I established the Mindful You Foundation, dedicating $10 million to support young entrepreneurs from challenging family backgrounds. The foundation provided not just funding but mentorship and emotional support, the things I had lacked during my own journey. At the foundation's launch event, I shared parts of my story publicly for the first time, speaking candidly about building a successful company without family support. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds of young entrepreneurs reaching out to share similar experiences of having to prove themselves against family members who didn't believe in them. Nearly a year after our IPO, as I was reviewing applications for the foundation's first cohort of entrepreneurs, I received an unexpected letter. The return address showed my father's name. I opened it with curiosity rather than anxiety, a sign of how much had changed. Inside was a single-page, handwritten, "Bertie, I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past year. Watching you succeed despite my behavior has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself. I was wrong. About your business, about your capabilities, and about my role as your father. The truth is, I think I was jealous. You accomplished something remarkable entirely on your own terms, something I never had the courage to do. Instead of supporting you, I tried to diminish you to make myself feel more important. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking to be part of your business. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you built and why it matters, and whether you believe it or not, I am proud of you. Dad." I read the letter several times, surprised by the genuine self-reflection it contained. It wasn't a complete transformation. True change takes more than a single letter, but it was perhaps the first honest communication we'd had in years. I didn't respond immediately. True reconciliation, if it ever came, would require time and consistent change on his part. But the letter represented something significant. The first crack in the wall of denial and control that had defined our relationship for so long. As I set the letter aside and returned to my work, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. Building Mindful You had never been about proving my father wrong. It had been about creating something meaningful that helped others. Yet, ironically, in pursuing that goal with integrity, I had freed myself from the need for his validation. The following week, I met with a young woman who had applied for our foundation's support. She had developed an innovative education app while struggling with family members who belittled her ambitions. As she nervously pitched her concept, I saw my younger self in her determination and vulnerability. "The hardest lesson I've learned," I told her after her presentation, "is that you can't build something meaningful if you're doing it for someone else's approval. True success comes when you define it on your own terms." Her eyes widened with recognition, and I knew my words had resonated with her own experience. "The people who don't believe in you now may never change their minds," I continued. "And that's okay. Build it anyway. Not to prove them wrong, but because you believe in your vision. That's the path to not just success, but to freedom. As she left my office with funding and mentorship secured, I felt a profound sense of completion. The cycle of seeking validation that had driven so much of my early life had been broken. In its place was something more valuable, the knowledge that I had built something that mattered on my own terms and was now helping others do the same. The journey from that crushing text on graduation day to becoming a billionaire CEO had been painful but necessary. It had taught me that true success isn't measured in stock prices or market capitalization, but in the strength to define your own worth independent of others' opinions, even those whose approval you once desperately sought. Have you ever had to choose between seeking someone's approval and following your own path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories of triumph over adversity, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' opinions of them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most important validation is the one you give yourself.